My name is Morgan Young. I am interviewing Frankie Bell for the Oregon State Capitol Foundation Oral History Project. It is October 17th, 2024, and we are in Frankie's home in Salem, Oregon. So we're going to start with when you first moved to this city, when you moved to Salem.
I was with my husband at the U of O in Eugene, and he got a job with the state, and I came along with him. And that was in 1966, I believe.
Did you move into this house where we are right now?
Oh no, oh no. It was a little apartment on Portland Road. I got a job at Mine Frank, and I heard about a job that was opening at the Capitol, and I was acquainted with the person who ran personnel services, and he said, "There's a job at the Capitol." Are we okay?
Yep.
There's a job at the Capitol that you'd be perfect for. It was a Capitol guide, and I went and applied, and there was competition, but I got it. And so for 2 years, I was, quote, a Capitol guide. My supervisor, Bob Ebersole, had been there for quite a long time, and he retired. And so then the supervisor's job was open, and I applied. It took them over 2 months to make a decision because they weren't sure that a woman could do the job. At that time, Visitor Services, or the Capitol Guide Office, which it was called, was under the auspices of the Highway Division. That was because tourism was there, and they thought that this unit fit well under tourism. And it did, in a way, because the Capitol is probably, well, it is the #1 visitor site in Salem. So for many years, we were under the Highway Division and Travel Information section. And then in 1977, when the wings went on the building, the legislature decided they wanted us to work for them. So we became a part of the legislature at that point.
Was that under the legislative administrator?
It was under legislative administration, yes.
So let's go backwards for a second, though. Had you visited the Capitol before you applied to be a guide?
Oh, well, the story that I have is that my grandmother lived in Eugene, my mother lived in Portland, and so as a child, they would put me on the bus to go back and forth between Eugene and Salem, and the high point of the trip was when I came down Highway 99, which is now Capitol Street, and saw the Capitol and the Gold Man, and I just was in awe. That was the high point of my trip.
What about your memories of the first time you went in the Capitol building?
Just like everybody, you walk into the rotunda and you're in awe. It is such a beautiful building. The simplicity, it's so different than any other Capitol in the United States. Built in the 30s, Art Deco is not what most capitals are. There are a few that are close to that, like Louisiana has one that was built in 1933, and Nebraska has sort of an Art Deco capital as well, but Oregon's is unique. It wasn't well taken to in the beginning when it was first finished, and the people would, I think I heard somebody say, it looks like a birthday cake. And it sort of does, but a beautiful birthday cake.
I would imagine it was quite radical, quite modern when it opened in the 30s.
It was, yes, I think, very much so.
So what was it like as a tour guide? Did you develop your own script, or how did you find out the information that you presented to the public?
Well, you, of course, studied a lot. And there was a script already written with all the facts, and so of course you learn the facts and relay that to the visitors. It has changed over the years because we have changed our opinion of how Oregon was founded. The Native Americans were really definitely left out of the history, and that's being rectified now.
What were your responsibilities when you became you were the first woman to serve as the chief Capitol guide, I believe?
That's exactly right. Chief Capitol Guide was
that's the supervisor role?
That's the supervisor role. Well, it was mainly giving tours, providing tours with a very small staff. I had one assistant, and we took care of the visitors, greeted them, made them feel comfortable, gave directions to the visitors. When I started, the wings were not on the building, so our office was right straight back through the rotunda, and we saw everybody who came through the building. We got many calls during the day saying, "Have you seen so-and-so?" And we were right under the governor's office, and we had a really nice little visitor office, which was greatly enhanced when the wings went on the building. But our job was just greeting visitors, giving tours. Somewhere down the road, I suggested that maybe we needed a gift shop. That took a while, and I had to convince them that a gift shop would be viable. So I asked them if we could have a postcard rack. And so I got a postcard rack. That was a start. And in 1 month, I sold $400 worth of postcards. So that helped. And then what else helped was that one day I was having coffee with Norma Paulus, who was the Secretary of State, and Nellie Ripper, who was the wife of Jack Ripper, who was co-chair of Ways and Means. And Nellie said, I think we should have some brass rubbings of the building so that people could take something away from the building. And I said, but Nellie, we have no way to sell them. And she said, well, I sleep with the co-chair of Ways and Means. The next day, we had a bill for an act, and we had a gift shop. So suddenly I had a gift shop with no retail background, and I had suggested that we only sell Oregon products in the building, or in the Capitol gift shop, and that was a problem back then. It was a little hard to find touristy things that were made in Oregon. They mostly came from Japan or China. So I went through the Oregon Manufacturer's Guide to try to find as many products that we could possibly sell in the gift shop. I also asked if I could have a retail consultant come in. And so that happened, and we set up the gift shop, and it was a good success. It has a revolving account. When it gets if it makes over $30,000 in a month, the money dips into facilities for special projects.
So that's been more than 30 years of the gift shop.
Right.
40 years this year.
Yeah.
Wow. So there also was that you started working for the information desk at the legislature. Is that true?
Well, the information kiosk.
Okay.
It was really by then it was called Visitor Services. It kept evolving. It had different names through the years. At one point, we were even called Capitol Use Office, because we also, along with greeting visitors, had taken on the responsibility of letting the rooms. The Capitol rents the rooms to the public, And I helped establish a fee structure so that when outside groups used the Capitol, there was a fee to pay for the facilities aspect of taking care of the rooms.
So you were really the initial access point. If a visitor comes into the Capitol, they're interacting with you and your staff.
Right, right. So yes, and answering all sorts of questions, not just questions about the Capitol, but questions like, how do I start a dog cemetery? Truly, that was a question that I got. And we were very resourceful. Because when people had state business to do, they saw the Capitol, so they came to the Capitol and said, to see if they could get directions to where they wanted to go.
So how were you gaining all of this information to be able to field some of these questions from members of the public?
Well, one of our best resources was the state phone book. We relied heavily on that in the beginning when the printed page was how you did research. And we got, because of our tenure, my assistant and me, we knew a lot. I mean, we just actually were able to, over time, learn how you got things done with state government.
Did the legislators come to you for information as well?
Well, they were interested, of course. The groups that came for tours were their constituents. So we were, and we needed to be very careful with how we didn't want to show favoritism so that one legislator was getting to see more groups than another. So we had a calendar of the groups who were coming sent out to the office every week. And if they wanted to talk to one of the groups, it wasn't at our request, they requested. So then we couldn't be showing favoritism.
What was it like working in the Capitol when the legislature was in session versus when they were not?
Well, like with everybody else, we got more industrious sometimes when we weren't in session because session was so busy. The off legislative year, we did a lot of planning, and we always were busy with tours. School groups came all the time. Visitors came all the time. So we were busy year-round, whether we were in session or not. Legislature, of course, made it much more busy for us. But the workload seemed to even out.
Would the people coming through either as individuals or as school groups, were they making reservations for these tours?
We offered tours at regular hours, and the school groups made reservations.
Did that system exist before you came on board, a reservation system?
But not really formally. When I was supervising the visitor services, we had legislative visits and regular building tours. They were differentiated. And we had legislative visits for 7th grade and up, junior high, because they're studying how a bill becomes law. 4th graders are studying the history of Oregon. So we decided that the 7th grade and up would have a little bit more patience to sit and listen to a legislative session than 4th graders. I think that they don't do that anymore. I think that it's first come, first serve.
What does it mean to you when someone describes the Capitol as the people's building?
It warms my heart. I think it is a symbol of Oregon, and I'm very convinced that the more people have to know about their capital and their legislature, the better state we'll have.
So You also became the visitor service manager, which I'm guessing is different from chief Capitol guide.
Yes, well, a lot more responsibility, yes.
And you started a volunteer program.
Yes.
So all the guides before, were they all paid guides?
All, you say all, I had very little staff.
Okay.
But in the 80s, when budgets were cut, I was down to one staff person. And I wanted to continue to give the service, so the idea came of a volunteer program, which took off immediately. And I was able to hire a volunteer coordinator. She was really good. She brought in about 30 volunteers just overnight, practically. And of course, training and all of that increased our workload as well, but they were wonderful. And the enthusiasm was not to be believed. It was just really great.
Were these individuals who already had some sort of connection to the Capitol?
Not necessarily. No, the lady that I hired had never had a job, and was the wife of a doctor, and so knew a lot of people in Dallas. She was from Dallas, Oregon, and she just brought all those people with her when she came, and it was her first real job for pay. She'd done a lot of volunteer work with the hospital in Dallas, and she brought some marvelous people, and it really got it started. It was really good.
I read some Oregonian articles about you, and in them you were described as the conscience of the Capitol. Have you heard that before?
I think that's a little far-fetched. Conscience, no.
It seems that you know the building very well, and you know what happens in the building very well.
Yeah, I'd say that's true, yes. And I'm still working. I've been asked to work for this next legislature, and since I had just broken my leg, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do that, but certainly will give it a try. It's a job as receptionist. I've been a receptionist for the House chamber during session. I've done, actually after I retired in 1997, I haven't been separated from the Capitol. I'm still there.
And you started in 1960 something? 67?
In 1967 is when I began, yeah. Hatfield was governor. He was just on his way out, and Tom McCall was taking over.
Have you ever counted how many governors you've been associated with the Capitol?
Actually, no. Maybe I ought to do that.
We can do that afterwards. But those are some very important governors that you've been able to work in the Capitol.
And they've all been amazing. They always seem to have been the right person at the right time. Party was not a consideration. Some of the most important legislation that has happened in the Capitol happened when we had a Republican majority and a Republican governor, Tom McCall, and of course he's quite famous for that. And we had a conservative coalition in the Senate, and we passed the most progressive legislation I think that any state has ever passed during that period of time.
So you're referring to like the bottle bill and the beach bill?
The bottle bill, the beach bill, land use planning, bicycle bill, amazing things that we probably would have a hard time agreeing on now.
Having been in the Capitol when those were passed, did you have any idea that they would be as influential, as important laws then?
I had an inkling.
Yeah.
I had an inkling. I was very proud to be there. It was inspiring. to see the care that they were taking of our state. It was really wonderful.
What are other events that you remember?
Well, the Capitol is a crossroad. I've met some interesting people. When Governor McCall was there, he attracted a lot of outside attention, and I was trying to think of when he was there. You probably don't know because you're too young. Elliot Richardson was, I think he was U.S. Secretary of State. He came to visit. Steve Croft from 60 Minutes came. Jesse Jackson came when he was campaigning. Anyway, some interesting people have come through the Capitol. And so how I use the idea that it is sort of a crossroad is when I was in Europe, I was in the Sistine Chapel, and I looked across the way, and there was a lobbyist from the Capitol that I knew. And then a week later, when I was in Venice, somebody in the piazza said, "Frankie, is that you?" And it was a fellow who had worked for me. And then getting on the plane, leaving Venice, was a lady who worked for a senator in the building. So in the course of about 10 days, I saw 3 people from Oregon. And it's only because I was in this center in Oregon so that I've met so many different people that have just passed through the building.
What are other events that have happened? Are opening sessions powerful when the legislature opens for the first time, or inaugurations of governors?
Well, the ceremony is always fun. I mean, I really, I love the pomp and circumstance of the openings, but it's, it's been alluded to before that we have holidays at the Capitol. That's a wonderful event that happens in the building, and of course not now because it's under construction, but every year amazing decorations happen. And it's all started one time when a lady who came into the building and complained about how awful the rotunda looked. We had an old peanuts tree in the rotunda, and the janitors had to decorate it, and they hated that job. They just hated it. And she said she would like to take it on. And so she did, and we all worked on it, and it turned into quite a tradition. In fact, it got to be almost too much. When the spring break quake happened in the Capitol and the rotunda was shut down, we took the chance to bring the whole project back a little bit because it had gotten sort of out of control. Every corner of the building was decorated, and it was a lot of work, and it was all volunteer. There was no state dollars in the decorating part of it. She raised the money, and so we couldn't be criticized for doing all this with state dollars.
You mentioned being able to observe specific legislation passing. I wonder if you've noticed how the legislature itself has changed over time, perhaps with more women serving, more people of color serving.
Definitely. Yes, that's a good question because it has changed a lot. Here's an example of a really kind of small thing that happened was when Norma Paulus and a number of women were elected. Before that, women would not wear slacks to work. And Norma was very stylish, and she wore slacks. And so we all we women figured out that we could get away with it, so we started wearing slacks. Can you believe it?
How radical.
It's so radical, yeah.
Well, and you were there for the 73 session. Wasn't that the highest number of women on the legislature to date?
That's right. That's exactly when it happened, too. You're better at dates than I am.
Well, that session is just so iconic. I think there were
was
13 pieces of feminist legislation that passed that
exactly.
session.
Exactly. That's the interesting part of being in the building is seeing the change. It used to be in the beginning, when I first went to work there was no class structure. Everybody coffeed together. The governor was down there for lunch. I always watched him because he was such a gentleman. Every time somebody would come up to the table, he'd stand up. He hardly ever got to finish his lunch. But there was no, as I said, no class structure at all. We were all just working together and getting stuff done. And that has changed now. And we used to party together as well. But when they limited the amount of money that lobbyists could spend, that whole structure changed. No late nights. And part of me could understand why that happened, but another part of me felt sad because everybody talked to everybody else. There was exchange of ideas. I can kind of give you an example of a typical evening back in the 70s. After work, everybody would go to the Marion Hotel, the Velvet Horse Lounge. It didn't matter. You could go. I was single. I could go and feel perfectly comfortable. So we'd have a cocktail, and then the Republicans would go to the Colonial House, which was in South Salem, and the Democrats would go north to Chuck's and continue partying. And then at about 10 o'clock, when the Colonial House closed down, the Republicans would gravitate toward Chuck's, and everybody would get together. There was quite a bit of drinking going on. I guess we could criticize that, but it made for a pretty congenial legislature.
I would imagine smoking too.
Smoking
in the
yes.
building.
Smoking in the building was just, it actually was quite disgusting. But the lobbyists used to hold forth outside the Senate chambers. They put out tables for them, and they'd use one of the hearing rooms for phone booths so that the lobbyists had a place to go so that they could talk to whomever they had to talk to. And they would sit there and they'd smoke and read the paper, and it was not a pretty picture. But they were really upset when they were moved down to room 40 in the basement. Herb Colum was then facilities, in charge of facilities, and he had the job of trying to make the lobbyists feel okay about it. By then, I had retired, and I got hired by the Capitol Club to run the Lobby Message Center. So I had the job of trying to make people feel okay about having to come down to the basement. So I created a Lobby Message Center that was so comfortable, and Herb and facilities were so good about providing really nice furniture. They were really comfortable, and they got over their anger about having to be moved down from the Senate chambers.
I want to talk a little bit about your committee work. and particularly your work with the Capital Preservation Advisory Committee, because you've been working in this historic building, but
Right.
it didn't have, I don't think it had a historic designation yet when you started, right? It wasn't
Right,
on the National Register.
right. Elizabeth Walton, who was with I think that you have interviewed her. She was with the. I'm trying to think of what the term was for it. It was under the Parks
Was she with the
Historic Preservation.
State Historic Preservation
State,
Office?
yeah, she was with the yes, and anyway, she actually made that happen, and she was a part of the Capital Preservation Advisory Committee, and the CPAC came out of for the reason of trying to figure out some continuity and some sort of way to deal with the various and sundry ideas that people have. I'll give you an example of one, the Medal of Honor plaques. They were pushing real hard to have them hung in the building. And CPAC, we came up with the idea of having them outside, which was palatable because, for one thing, people who were visiting and the building was closed on the weekends, they could still see the Medal of Honor plaques. So that was one of the reasons we said that it would be good to have them outside. And it is a nice presentation.
So did you work as a committee on getting the building listed on the National Register, of getting it some historic protections?
Well, Elizabeth Walton really did it.
She did.
It was easy for us just to sign on and say, yay. She did all the work. And that did help a lot with being able to say, no, you can't hang the Mother of the Year plaque outside the House chambers. Anyway, CPAC was really a good stopgap for various and sundry people who felt they wanted to have Grandma Moses' a painting hanging on the wall in the rotunda.
Yeah, it gives you some guidelines.
It gave some guidelines, yeah. Up till then, there had been none. It was just word of mouth. The architect, Francis Keeley, said that the original part of the building it should not be adorned. We probably have gone a little overboard by putting all the governor's portraits in the hallway on the second floor.
Are all of them are on display?
No, not all. That would be too many. But I can't remember when it started, but that was a Norma Paulus thing. She had a historical properties commission, and her primary goal was to raise money to do portraits of governors. And I can't remember who was. Oh, Tom McCall was the first governor portrait that we did. Anyway, so now it has become a tradition that each governor will have a portrait. The foundation is actually searching for portraits, and they have turned up some. But the owners of the portraits want to keep them, which is fine, because we can't possibly hang all of the portraits of all of the governors of the state of Oregon if we could possibly find them. Too many.
Have you sought out portraits from some of the territorial governors? I wonder if they've had them made.
I don't think so.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned Herb, and he's one person you worked with. Are there other individuals or groups of individuals that stick out in your mind of people you've worked with over the years?
I've had all sorts of different bosses. They never could quite figure out where visitor services fit. Sometimes we were a part of employee services. Herb was our boss at one point. Finally, Dave Henderson, who was the last administrator that I worked with, he took visitor services right directly under legislative administration, which in a way is where it should have been from the beginning, but they just couldn't figure out what to do with visitor services because that was the only really public outreach part of the legislature, that in the bill room where people would go to get bills, but just as a general information area, that was what we did, and it didn't really fit with legislative fiscal or legislative council. So finally, it found a home under the administrator, and that was because of Dave Henderson.
And it's still there today, right?
It's still there, and getting better all the time. I mean, they've just, I mean, it's just amazing. And they work closely with the foundation, and we've been able to finance some really wonderful projects with them. And we'll see more when the building is completed after this seismic upgrade happens.
Yeah, well, speaking of changes to the building, you've worked there when many changes have happened. So I want to talk a little bit about your recollections of some things like the wings being a major addition.
Really. I have one little story that's kind of funny. I was looking at the plans one day, and when they were adding the wings, and there was the visitor's office was off to the left, and there was no kiosk. There was no person that you could see when you came in the front door or the back door. And so what would happen, I explained to them, what would happen is that visitors would go down the hall and go into the first office that they came to and ask, how do I get to, or have you seen, or where do I go for tours? And so it stopped the whole remodel. It stopped because they had to go back to the drawing board, figure out how we could accommodate a visual visitor center. So they came up with this kiosk idea, and the kiosk cost $20,000, which in the 70s was a lot of money. And I got teased unmercifully for it was like it was my idea that we would have a $20,000 kiosk. I would have been happy with a simple desk, so that coming through the front door, you would see somebody as you went through the rotunda. But the remodel was great. Before that, of course, the offices for the legislators were their desks in the House and Senate. Those legislators that had
Male person.
yeah, those legislators that had committees, of course, had offices, but the legislators who didn't, just their office was on the floor of the House and Senate.
It was just their desk, right?
Their desk, and if as a visitor you could go and go right into the chamber, because that was there they were.
Well, you already mentioned the spring break quake.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that. That's, it damaged the rotunda and...
Yeah, the rotunda was shut off, so that affected our office greatly. And they figured out a way to jerry-rig a little office for us just to the left of the front revolving doors. It was kind of like a closet, and we had a little desk out front, so we were displaced while the rotunda was being reinforced. It was very awkward. I don't remember how long it was closed, but it was closed for quite a long time, and it was very uncomfortable. We were really, really happy to be back in our office.
It seemed like, in my understanding of the rotunda restoration, that they brought in specialists to be able to
Yes, it was
meticulously.
fabulous, fabulous to work on the murals. Yeah, it was just great to see the up on the scaffolding, just with just the smallest details. It was just fabulous.
And what about well, you were retired, but I imagine you were still working in the Capitol in some capacity, but the fire in 2008, that was mainly affected the ceremonial office of the governor?
Right, and as we were talking about earlier, it really, it was a good thing for the governor's office, because it really enhanced and brought back. We were sure that under the carpet there was terrazzo. We were wrong about that. It was a tile of sorts, but it was pretty tile. Anyway, they did a beautiful job of rehabilitating the governor's office, and it was more of a pleasure to take people in there too, because it was such a pleasant place that looked like it did when the building was built in 1938.
Yeah, that's the challenging part, I would imagine, or adds complexity of working in a historic building that is a functioning center of state government. It needs to
Right.
be able to function, but then you get these layers of 1970s additions or
Right.
1980s carpet.
Peter Courtney, when he was president of the Senate, and this was another job that I had. I was Senate receptionist, and so at the end of the session, he would call the staff in, and everybody would recognize the staff and applaud and see. And so he introduced me as the person who was born in the Capitol. Actually, I was born in 1937, the year that it was being built.
We'll see.
So, maybe.
Yeah, it seems like fate that you had
Yeah.
to work in the Capitol.
Yeah.
And have you been involved at all in CAMs? Or the effort
Not
leading
very
up to
much.
CAMs?
Just as the foundation, of course, I've toured, and I'm fascinated with it. And I kind of, when we were down under the building and looking at it, I saw the tile. I mean, when you get down there, you lose your orientation of where things used to be, and there was the tile that was in the coffee shop, so I knew where I was in the building. It's a wonderful project. I'm thrilled with it. It's going to be so exciting. I can hardly wait for the dedication of the new building.
Is that projected for next year, for 2025?
26, I think, probably. Okay. It's amazing. It's an amazing project. Oregon's going to be lucky to have that building.
Yeah, absolutely. The seismic upgrades, the advancements.
Yeah. In a way, sad that we didn't do it earlier, but the technology is so much better now. And of course, the cost is a lot higher too. So there's the trade-off. But it's a wonderful project, and people of Oregon are going to benefit.
I want to shift from your role as an employee who worked in the Capitol to the Oregon State Capitol Foundation. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that came to be?
It was an idea.
And
started out as an idea of called Capitol Friends. One of the things that happened after the spending restrictions on the lobbyists happened, they used to have what they would call a hello party, where everybody would get together at the beginning of the session and have a fantastic party. That wasn't They weren't able to do that anymore because of the spending limitations. So we kind of took over and started this. And it was sort of the germ of the idea that people want to celebrate and get together. And so this kind of blossomed into the idea that there are a lot of people who still want to be connected with the building, even though they're no longer there. It may have been the most important time of their life when they were legislators or staffers in the Capitol. And that was the germ, that was the idea of having an alumnus for the building, not unlike college, high school. It's a very important time of your life. So that was the beginning of the idea of the Capitol Foundation. And then from there, we grew to outreach and civics education and continuing to enhance the visitor experience in the building. And it's been very successful.
Can you imagine when that idea started, that it would grow to what it is today?
No. One of the most determining factors, in the beginning we just kind of limped along because we didn't quite know what we wanted to be. And then Senator Metzger decided that the license plate money might be, or a special license plate might be a good fundraiser. And so he was able to pass the legislation, and we have the Pacific Wonderland plate. Half of the proceeds go to the Oregon Historical Society and half to the Capitol Foundation. So you can do a lot of things, but you can't do things without money. So that really helped. We did have donations, of course, before that, but nothing like the revenue that we're getting from the Pacific Wonderland plates.
You know, we talked earlier about the Capitol being the people's building. One concept that the foundation champions is the Capitol History Gateway. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, it's a place to go out from, and it's not just about the Capitol. It's bigger than that. It's the history of Oregon, and the Gateway is promoting that. So that's not my part of the expertise. That was something that blossomed after I really was involved in the beginning, and they're doing some really wonderful things.
The other aspects that I've noted, I mean, obviously there's the Oral History Project, why we're here today.
Yes.
And why we've been able to interview such amazing people, but there's other projects like preserving our Capitol and engaging Oregonians in democracy. And I believe the foundation is also involved in Percent for Art, or haven't you been involved in that?
Yes, I'm on the committee. So there is and Herb referred to the art collection in the building, and that is a part of the Percent for Art that is designated. Anytime a building is remodeled, any money that's spent on state buildings, a percent of that goes for art in the building. This second go here with the art that we're proposing for the building this time there'll be a lot of emphasis on Native American art, long overdue.
That's amazing. What were some, so speaking of the art collection, Are there particular details in the Capitol, the rotunda, or rooms, or pieces of art that are favorites of yours or special to you?
Well, yes. The murals are interesting, but they're really controversial. It really shows a historic explanation of Oregon history that is not quite correct.
It's a particular narrative.
It's a particular narrative that has become more controversial. For instance, the Great Wagon Train Migration mural shows the pioneers that came and Narcissa Whitman and Eliza Spaulding, and they got the measles. And the Native Americans, they brought the measles, they didn't get the measles, and decimated the Native American population. We didn't talk about that when we were giving tours of the building. So, but there's still a story to be told in the murals. So as we were doing the percent for art for the renewed building, that's being taken into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can talk about whose histories aren't included in histories that went up in the 1930s.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And there can be a lot of power in that.
Yeah.
In 2021, you became the first recipient of the Oregon State Capitol Foundation Frankie Bell Award, which I'm glad that you got the first Frankie Bell Award. That would have been shocking if it did not go to Frankie Bell.
Well, I was aghast. There's nothing to say. I mean, I certainly can't take a lot of credit. I had an idea, and it flourished, and I'm proud of that.
And you had an idea, and you worked with people, and lots of people
There were fabulous, fabulous people working. I can't even begin to name them all, but everybody came together, and we have a Capitol Foundation that is, I think, doing some really good things.
You've been closely associated with the Oregon State Capitol for nearly 60 years, so most of your life.
Right.
Why is this building and the people associated with it so important to you?
It's the seat of state government. It's where everything happens. And it was a wonderful place to work. I don't think anybody can possibly know from the outside how wonderful it is to watch the news at night and know what they're talking about when they talk about legislation that's passed or is controversial. Of course, you were able to draw your own conclusions, get your own opinions, but you really were seeing sausage being made, I felt honored to be a part of that.
Why should Oregonians be invested in the Capitol and in what happens in the Capitol?
Because they should have a say in what happens, and they should be cognizant of who they're voting for, and get all the facts. Be active. The Capitol legislature is only as good as the people. I think there's an inscription in the rotunda that says, I wish I could quote it, but I can't. And it really is that what happens in politics and to the state of Oregon is a result of the people and how involved they are in what happens. It's a quote from Plato, and I wish I had it because it's really wonderful.
We can look it up and we'll add it to
do that, because Yeah, it's not the way people think of it. They think of the government as they. They are the government. The government will only be as good as they are. If the people are corrupt, so will government be. That's the gist of the inscription. It's right under the governor. It's right on the second floor. It's right under the governor's office. It's really good.
Those are the questions I had. Are there other things you want to make sure that we covered?
Heck no.
Okay.
Chase, do you want